yesterday I was in the town of Forfar and bought myself something to eat. It's pastry with meat inside, steak and gravy, and possibly some onion. It's called a bridie. It's this is the real article. This is the real thing. This is a Forfar bridie. Very tasty. And it got me thinking. It got me thinking about a dog we used to have. Back in 1976, we thought it would be nice to get a puppy, and we thought ideally a Labrador, preferably a black Labrador, because we live in the country and it can go out, it can get mucky, it can get dirty, and it'll not show the dirt. We thought a black Labrador, absolutely ideal. So off we went, and we went up to the Angus Glens, to Glen Prosen, and got ourselves a lovely little black Labrador puppy, a little darling, absolutely beautiful, gorgeous. And we drove home. I was driving, and my wife Julia was sitting alongside me with a towel on her lap, and this lovely little puppy sitting there, trembling a little bit, as I remember, because it was very exciting for her. And as we drove along, we wondered what we would call this little puppy. We had no idea. We hadn't thought this through beforehand. And a little bit like, if anyone remembers, the Reggie Perrin series, where Reggie gets a bit fed up working for Sunshine Desserts and decides to chuck it all in and change his identity. And he's done that and realises he needs a new name to go with his new identity. So he thought he would call himself Colin, and he's driving through the countryside trying to think of a surname. And he said, Colin, the first thing I see when I look over this hedge, Colin Cowpat. Colin Cowpat, no. So we thought, no, there's no way we're going to call our new black Labrador puppy Cowpat. We've got to come up with a better idea than that. So we're driving through Forfar, and we drove past a little shop, the Forfar Bridie shop, and jokingly we said we could call her Forfar Bridie. And we thought, no, that's ridiculous. You can't call a dog Forfar Bridie. And then we thought, well, Bridie, that's actually quite a nice name. It's an Irish girl's name, Bridie. And by the time we got home, this lovely little puppy had a name, Bridie. And little did we realise how appropriate it would be naming her after an item of food. Because as everyone knows, of all dogs, Labradors love their grub. They'll eat just about anything. And Bridie was no different. She got off to a flying start. Whatever food we gave her, she ate. We gave her meat, we gave her dry food, we gave her scraps from the table. Everything went down the hatch just in a gobble. She never chewed anything. She just down the hatch. But unfortunately, Bridie was worse than any other Labrador we've ever heard of. The first thing that happened was when we left her just for a short time on her own in the house and came back, and, well, for a start, Bridie could hardly walk. She was waddling across the floor towards us, and she was like a barrel. She was almost bursting. She'd opened the fridge door, and she had eaten just about everything, and I mean everything. Back in the 1970s, we were lucky to have a fridge for a start, but we didn't keep a lot of stuff in bottles and jars and things like that. We had, for example, a raw chicken. It had gone. She'd eaten an entire raw chicken. Butter. We had a block of butter wrapped in greaseproof paper. The whole block of butter had gone. We had half a dozen eggs. Only one egg was left. She'd eaten all the eggs. The fridge had completely emptied and she'd stuffed herself to the point of exploding. Nowadays, you'd rush your dog to the vet, but back then, I mean, we couldn't afford a vet for a start, and there weren't the numbers of vets that there are nowadays. So we just left her for a couple of days to slowly regain her shape. And that was when we realised we were in serious trouble with this dog. So what came after the fridge? I mean, I've got a whole load of stories to tell you, but I'll just tell you 2 or 3 of them. I don't know if anyone uses dental floss. You can still get it. And I bought myself a pack of dental floss. And just like this one says 100 metres of dental floss. So back then it would have been 100 yards. And you take a bit off like that, and it's got a little metal thing on it, and you snap a bit off and you do your teeth with it. That's fine. Nice, easy and straightforward. I had one of these brand new in the bathroom. The next time I went to the bathroom, the plastic was all in bits on the floor, and the dental floss inside had vanished. Had gone, disappeared. And I looked all round the house, I looked here, there and everywhere for it. No dental floss. What I didn't realise was it was inside Bridie. She'd left the plastic and she'd eaten the dental floss. So how did I know that? It was the next day when she went out into the field to do her business, go to the toilet. And she was having a bit of bother. I went along to have a look to see what was going on. And a yard of dental floss was hanging out of her bum. And obviously it was itchy. What do you do when a dog's walking around with a yard of dental floss hanging out of its bum? You get a pair of scissors and you cut it off. But there's another 99 yards to go. And for the next couple of days, she spent the whole time, what do you call it, streaking. She was streaking in the field, she was streaking in the garden, streaking on the lawn. In the house she was streaking on the carpet, and every time she streaked, another yard of dental floss would come out, and I'd have to get the scissors and cut it off. That went on for about 2 days, following her, cutting off yards and yards of dental floss. What happened next? It was my birthday, and someone had very kindly, I think it was my mother, given me a pair of new socks. Now, nowadays, you buy socks and they're in a kind of paper like that. But it was one pair of socks, and they were very good quality socks. They were Marks and Spencer socks. And they came like that, but with a plastic tab holding them together. I was very pleased to get a pair of socks. That's what mothers give you, isn't it? And I carefully put my pair of socks upstairs on my bed, ready to be put in a drawer later on. And later on I went upstairs to put my socks in the drawer. They'd gone, they'd vanished, no socks. Had my wife Julia put them away somewhere? She knew nothing about it. Had I forgotten and put them? No, they were nowhere. A pair of brand new socks had vanished. I need hardly say, the next day, Bridie's out in the field, going to the toilet, when what starts coming out of her bum? A sock. And she squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until the whole sock came out. But it didn't. It was attached to the next sock, and I had to wait until the next sock came out. This is no lie. An entire pair of socks came out her bottom. She hadn't even chewed them. They were in perfect condition apart from the obvious. And I could have, had I been of a mind, I could have taken those socks, put them in the washing machine, and they'd have been ready to wear. But obviously I didn't. That was my birthday socks. What next? Well, she ate a car. I mean, she didn't literally devour an entire car, but I was working in a drawing office in Forfar, and my boss at the time asked me to go and collect a new company car. I had to drive his Daimler all the way to Kirkcaldy, quite a few miles away, and pick up a spanking new Cortina Estate, a V6. Was it a Gear or something? It was top of the range. And I took Bridie with me. Bridie sat alongside me in this Daimler, and we swished along in style all the way to Kirkcaldy, did the deal, picked up this new car. It had 3 miles on the clock, spanking new. And I drove all the way back to Forfar with it, parked it up, went into the office with all the paperwork, dealt with that. I'd left Bridie sitting in the car, went back. She had eaten the car. Everything on the inside of the car she had chewed. The steering wheel, completely chewed. The handbrake, gnawed, had to be replaced. The gear knob, chewed, had to be replaced. The entire dashboard, back in those days, this would have been, 1978 probably. Radios, everything had knobs and levers. Everything, she'd either chewed them if they didn't come off, or she'd pulled them off and swallowed them. The radio knobs had vanished. They were inside her. Back then, windows all had handles. You wound the windows up and down. She'd chewed the knobs off the handles. Everything. The seats, she chewed the entire lot. Back then it was hundreds of pounds worth of damage, which today would have probably been £2,000 or £3,000 worth of damage. What a disaster, and how I explained that one away I can't remember, but I certainly didn't get that Cortina Estate as my new company car. I was given a bloomin' escort, a basic escort, and that was that. But worse was to follow. It was when I was working in the same place, in a drawing office, and you have to remember, these were the days before computers. These were the days of drawing boards and set squares, pencils and pens, and if you made a mistake with a pencil, you erased it with a rubber. But if you made a mistake with an ink pen on paper, it was very difficult to get off. The only way was to scratch it off the surface, and for that we used razor blades. I've still got one of these. I had to nip out for a meeting and I couldn't take Bridie with me, so she was going to stay in the office. I went out, I got in the car, which was facing the office window, and Bridie was looking out the window, looking at me. Her head was going back and forth. I could tell she was happy. She was wagging her tail and she knew I'd be back quite soon. But something was wrong. Something was dripping out of her mouth. Blood was dripping out of her mouth. I went inside to see what was going on. She was extremely obedient. She always did as she was told. And I said, Bridie, sit. Bridie, give. And out of her mouth, she dropped a razor blade. These things are lethal. It's a thin piece of metal with a sharp edge on both sides. It had been in her mouth and cut her tongue. And it bled and it bled. But luckily for Bridie, I think dog's saliva is sort of antiseptic, and eventually it stopped bleeding. Those are just a few stories of Bridie and food. I mean, you couldn't even take her out in the garden. I remember we used to have a gooseberry bush. We were very pleased with our gooseberry bush, and we both liked gooseberries. But when Bridie came along, as soon as the gooseberries started to look anything like gooseberries, she would bare her teeth, get her muzzle right in, and pick the gooseberries off and eat them. The whole lot, the entire bush. Not a gooseberry left for the family. It was awful. And on a dark winter's night, you'd let her out for her last little tinkle. And if it was a flying gale, pitch black, pouring rain, she'd disappear, she'd vanish on you. And I'd have to plod down the farm track into the village, round the back of our village restaurant, and she'd be there sniffing around looking to see if there were any scraps put in the bins. An awful dog. One of the other things that she liked, I mean, we just gave her water to drink, but she would steal your tea. If you left a cup of tea around, she would drink your tea. She loved milky tea. And beer, we used to take her to the pub and people would give her beer. I don't think tea or beer is good for dogs, don't do it. But she loved beer. But worst of all, she liked whiskey. Neat whiskey. And I only realised it one night when I was sitting by the fireside and I reached out for my glass of whiskey. I'd gone away for just a few seconds and I came back and there was nothing there. She'd drunk my whiskey. Neat. And from then on we had to be very, very careful leaving whiskey around. The clue was, though, when she drank whiskey, it made her sneeze. And she sneezed so hard that her chin banged off the floor. So if you heard Bridie sneeze and then thump, you knew she'd stolen whiskey. So there we are. That's the story of Bridie. And every year on her birthday, we would give her as a treat a Bridie. The trouble is, it was a waste of time and money. It would go down the hatch in one gobble and it was gone. So I would like to raise a glass to Bridie in memory of Bridie, a wonderful, wonderful dog, a wonderful Labrador. And here's to you, Bridie. God bless you. You were a wonderful dog, a great companion, and we had lots and lots of fun. Here's to Bridie. Bridie? Bridie?